All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison, and I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft inside of Cloud and AI. And today I'm super excited to be talking about chatbots. Chatbots is actually one of my favorite things to chat about, talk about, and so forth. I spent a couple of years working with various customers, partners, building out chatbots, and there's certainly a lot of cool things that you can do with chatbots, and also a lot of things that people, well, quite frankly, have done wrong when it comes to chatbots. And that's sort of what I want to talk about today. So I do want to real quick check to make sure that everybody can hear me. I, of course, am live. I have the chat window over there. So please, by all means, feel free to ask questions. This whole thing is really designed to be interactive. Fantastic. Hey, Maxime, how are you? Maxine is a cloud advocate just over in one of my sibling teams. So he's a fantastic guy. You should absolutely go follow him on Twitter. Megan is my teammate. SQL Allfather, dear friend of mine, Matthew. I've basically just got all of my friends that decided to show up, which makes me super happy. So anyway, yeah, so today I want to really have a bit of a conversation about chatbots. So what I'm going to be doing today is building a chatbot live here. And I'm going to openly admit that we're not going to get to a production quality bot. That's not going to be the goal today. But rather, the goal is going to be, oh, and hi, Major Gamer Geek. Nice to see you as well. But anyway, yeah, so the goal today is not going to be to get to a production quality bot per se. That putting together a production quality bot certainly takes a little bit of time to put together. But what I do want to explore is some of the different things that you need to think about when you're building a chatbot. That when we think about putting together, say, like a website, there are certain things that people just expect these days because people have a lot of experience working with websites. That if, for example, I bring up just simply the documentation page, anything is production quality if you're brave enough. I like that joke. But I'm just going to bring up the documentation page for the Microsoft Bot Framework. And what you're going to notice here is we have a lot of very familiar markers and objects and so forth that exist on this page. So you're going to notice that obviously all of these are links. And we know that because when we hover over, we see the nice little underline and so forth and so on. We sort of expect those little rectangles there to be buttons. Again, we're seeing the underlines and so forth. So we're seeing an awful lot here that we as web users are very familiar with. Like this all feels very homey. But when we're talking about a chatbot, we're talking about a very different experience because now we're going to be trying to communicate with a user through a completely different medium. That what we're going to be doing is communicating with our user quite frequently through whatever messaging app it is that they're using on their phone, or maybe if they were using something like Facebook, the little messaging app down on the lower right hand corner. And so as a result, two things wind up being true here. Number one is that a lot of the idioms that we're used to, excuse me, the underlines and so forth, are not going to be there. But then on top of that, when a user is communicating inside of something like Messenger, they're expecting to be able, at least to some degree, to be able to talk to your bot as if it were a human. And I'm couching that word. I'm being very careful about selecting that word here because, first of all, you want to make sure that you're never trying to pretend to be a human. Just don't do that. Partly because you start to get into real ethical concerns that we shouldn't be in the business of tricking our users. And if we're trying to pretend like a bot is a human, which it's definitely not, all that we're going to wind up doing here is just tricking our users. This is not a path that we want to go down. But on top of that, there's this little thing called uncanny valley, which is basically where, as things get realer and realer, people will just continue to accept it, and then you get to a point where you fall off dramatically. You just fall right off the edge, because now as things start to become more and more believable, there's this space here where people are going to start to ascribe more human qualities to it, and they're going to notice all the imperfections. And you can even actually get to a point where it feels almost uncomfortable. I'm not going to call out the particular movie, but it involves Christmas time and a train, and I'll let you kind of figure out what movie it is that I'm talking about. But this movie was infamous for its uncanny valley, because what they did was they shot it live and then they put animation over the top of it, and it just created this really weird experience that most of the viewers wound up rejecting, because it was just it just didn't feel right. And you're going to wind up doing that exact same thing if you try to pretend like your bot is human. You're just going to wind up in uncanny valley. On top of that, one thing that you're going to find about users is that users can be resilient. Quite frequently what will happen is that the user will thunk down to a lower and lower level when they figure out, oh, okay, I can't speak pure English to a bot. So that if you think about how it is that you maybe communicate with, say, Siri or Alexa or Cortana, you very quickly realize, oh, okay, I can't necessarily get away with pure English sentences, that what I need to do is sort of simplify things and go with commands. And your bot will sort of show your users that exact same thing, and then in turn your users will also thunk down. All of that being said, though, we still do lack all of those core idioms, and so we do need to think about how it is that our users are going to interact with the bot, and that's going to be what it is that I want to explore today. So I'm going to start like I typically do, with just a completely empty folder, and then build on from here. So that way you can see that there's like nothing up my sleeves, and that way hopefully we're not going to get too complex and wind up sort of losing people. That again, my goal here is not to focus in on the code. I want to highlight the fact that some of the things that we'll wind up doing in here aren't necessarily going to be the best coding practices, that there are helper libraries that can certainly help you out in different places. My goal, however, is really just to have you to start to think about some of the different ways that your users are going to interact with bots, and then also offer up some possible starting points that you could use to continue to build your bot from there. So that's going to be the goal for today. And I again want to state the fact that we are again live. So if you do have questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. I have sort of like a light agenda here, but if other questions come up and we wind up going other directions, that is totally fine. That's totally cool. So please, by all means, ask questions. If you happen to see my bot presentation from Tuesday, you'll know that we actually got derailed by a bunch of great questions, and we wound up doing something kind of completely different than what it was I was originally planning on doing. So by all means, feel free to ask questions. Okay. So with that, let me talk real quickly about the bot framework before we launch into it. So the bot framework is a collection of tools and components that are made available, of course, by Microsoft. And as part of the bot framework is this core component here of the SDK. And it's the SDK that we're going to use to interact with our users. On top of this, there also is a cool little bot service that can be used to be able to take the same code and deploy this out into multiple different what are called channels. And this would allow somebody, say, using Slack or using Messenger or using Teams to be able to communicate with my bot. And so that way I can have this one set of code and be able to run this on multiple platforms. And this is really important when we're talking about bots, because one big thing about working with bots is the fact that we want to be able to meet our users where they're at. So if they're on Messenger, we want to meet them there. If they're on Slack, we want to meet them there. Wherever it is that they happen to be, we want to make sure that they can communicate with our bot. That's what a bot is all about, meeting our users where they're at. So that's one great advantage to Bot Framework, is that fact that I can write this once and be able to deploy this out to multiple channels. Okay. So with that, let me kick over to my copy of Visual Studio Code here. And Bot UX presentation. Okay. So I've already downloaded and installed the Yeoman generator for Bot Framework. For those of you who are not familiar with Yeoman, Yeoman is basically it's a scaffolding tool, and what it will do is automatically, in my case, set up a bunch of code for me that I can go ahead and use to quickly get up and running with a bot. That it will set up a lot of the core plumbing that I might need. And I've already linked into the chat window here the URL that you can go walk through the quick start and see what the generator is all about. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to say yo, which is how I execute the Yeoman generator. And this is honestly my favorite part of Yeoman, that I love being able to just say yo, and then whatever the name of the service happens to be. So in my case, it's going to be yo, bot builder. There we go. And so now this is going to walk me through a little wizard where it's going to ask me a couple of questions. So the first question that it's going to ask me was, what's the name of my bot? I'm going to call my bot Festival. That what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a music festival bot. So the scenario here is I want this bot to be able to interact with people who are going to a music festival. And this, I think, is a great example of where a bot could shine. Because if you're thinking about a music festival, you're thinking about a lot of stages, you're thinking about a lot of bands, a lot of acts. Things can also change, that there might be an electrical issue, a band might have to cancel, we might get a surprise new band, etc. And we want some way that we can very quickly and effectively communicate with our festival goers, and then also allow our festival goers to be able to ask questions. So it's a perfect example of being able to meet users where they're at. And so I'm going to go with festival here. The Tellennial says, please call it dog. Yeah, I'm actually not going to use dogs as my example here. Although you can absolutely set up say a shelter bot. So, and anybody who knows me knows I'm all about adopt, don't shop. I'm all about rescue dogs. So we have an adorable Amstaff rescue. Okay, so new my bot is going to be Festival. What will our bot do? Talk to users about a music festival. The robot dog. There you go. And then now it's going to ask me what programming language I want to use. And I'm going to use TypeScript. So the reason that I'm going to use TypeScript here is just because it's going to make my life a little bit easier. For those of you who are not familiar with TypeScript, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript that in a lot of ways sorry, Tellennial made a kind of a nice little joke there. I was looking for yo dog. That would be great. Sorry, I'll try not to get distracted again here. So what programming language do I want to use? I want to use TypeScript. So for those of you who are not familiar with TypeScript, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript that you can almost think of TypeScript, and I'm oversimplifying here, so for anybody who's going to be pedantic, please forgive me for saying this. TypeScript is sort of a combination between JavaScript and, say, like Java and C#. That JavaScript is great because it's super flexible, but the challenge is that it's weakly typed, that you never really know what a variable is until you go to use it. And that poses a lot of challenges, especially at design time, because when I'm trying to figure out, hey, what's available to me, that autocomplete or IntelliSense isn't necessarily going to always be available to me when I'm using JavaScript. With TypeScript, however, I can always specify the type. Now, it's worth highlighting that you can still shove things around into different types and do all sorts of mean, nasty, rotten things with TypeScript that you could with JavaScript. But TypeScript is just going to make you work a little harder at being able to do that. So the advantage to using TypeScript for my demo here, and why I always use it, is because of the fact that I'm going to be able to just say dot and then see everything that is available off of that particular variable, off of that particular parameter. If you're not familiar with TypeScript, don't worry. That about 70% or so of the syntax of TypeScript is JavaScript. And so as a result, you will still feel rather comfortable in this environment. So don't worry too much about the fact that there's going to be some slightly different syntax here. We'll work through that as we go. Okay, so I'm going to go with TypeScript. Now it's going to ask me, well, what bot template do I want to use here? And the three options are going to be Echobot, CoreBot, and EmptyBot. EmptyBot, sort of as the name implies, is going to be empty. And to a certain extent, I almost find it maybe a little too empty. So instead, I'm going to go with one of the other two. And so the other two options are Echobot and CoreBot. So Echobot is going to automatically create a bot that will just echo whatever it is that the user says. And this is sort of the classic hello world example when we're talking about chatbots. And I'm going to use it here because it's going to give us just enough framework from which we can start to build, but not overwhelm us. And when we talk about CoreBot, and don't get me wrong, CoreBot is a fantastic template. It's just going to be a little bit too much. So what CoreBot is going to do is it's also going to include hooks for like Lewis and Q&A Maker and a lot of other things that we're just not going to wind up getting into today. And so this would be the this would be great if you were going to be creating a full production bot, but in my case, I'm going to go with Echobot. So I'm just going to choose that. Looking good. Should we go ahead and create it? I'm going to say yes, and then we'll go ahead and let it do the install. So somebody said bang info in the chat window. Sadly, and this is ironic since we're talking about bots, we don't have any form of a bot yet inside of our environment here. So I can tell you that we're chatting about chatbots. So we're going to be talking about the user experience for chatbots. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change directories into that festival directory, and I'm just going to real quick run an npm audit fix that unfortunately there's an older reference for NodeMon that needs to be updated, and so I just went ahead and did that. So okay, cool. Now what do we have? Well, I'm glad you asked. So what we have, what the Yeoman generator set up for us is a bunch of great little starting resources that we can go ahead and take advantage of. Now, it automatically set up a linting option for us, which honestly, I'm going to get rid of. simply because the linting option that they gave me, the linting setup that they have, is a little too overbearing, especially for what it is that we're going to be doing today. I love it for production. For demos, I don't want a whole bunch of red squigglies, so we're just going to throw that out the window. We've got a little tsconfig, and this is the setup for Typescript. Again, if you're familiar with Typescript, you can check that out. It's not going to really come into play, so I'm not too worried about it. We've got a little README that will describe a bit of what's going on, so you can go ahead and check that out. We've got our package.json, which will include all of the dependencies that we're going to need here. The couple that I want to call out, number one, of course, is going to be bot builder, which is going to give us access to the bot framework. And then Restify, which, as we're going to see, is going to be used for being able to create the endpoint that our bot is going to connect up to. You'll also notice that we do have NodeMon, and that will allow us to automatically refresh the service and in turn the bot every time that we make a change to our code. And then we also, of course, have Typescript. So those are some of the core packages that we have installed there. And then what we're going to notice inside of the source is two files here. So we've got an index.ts and we've got a bot.ts. So our index.ts, let's start here. Our index.ts is going to be the main entry point for our web service and in turn our bot. So let's talk for just a second here about bots and about bot framework and about how this is going to work. And I do want to highlight the fact that you can go back and check out my recording from Tuesday. It's over on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. Megan will be so kind, or she actually already has it in there. Has the link to the YouTube channel that you can go ahead and check it out. But at its most basic, all that a bot is it's just simply a web service. That what needs to happen here is the user's going to send a message to, say, Teams. And then Teams is going to capture that and need to send that off to our bot. How's it going to do that? It's going to do that by using a REST call. That's it. So a bot is really actually nothing more than a REST endpoint. And that's actually why we then in turn need something like Express, or in our case, we need Restify. So Restify is what we're going to use to create that endpoint. So what we're seeing here is we've got the little call to go get, to go load up Restify. And then if I scroll down here, what we're going to notice is that we're going to set up our server. This is our web server. This is where all of the bot messages are going to again come into. Or to get more specific, if I scroll on down just a little bit further here, what you're going to notice right here is that all of the messages are going to come through this one single post. So everything's going to come into that one route. We're going to get the request object. We're going to get the response object, just like we would for an Express application. In our case, it's going to be Restify. And then effectively what we're going to do is hand this off into our bot logic to be able to work with. Now, what's great about all of this is the fact that this is literally nothing but boilerplate code. So there's nothing special that I need to do here, that all that I need to do is just set up this little post and then eventually, of course, set up my bot. And so what I really am going to want to focus in on then is my bot. So let's start talking about the bot then. Okay. So the core object that we've got is our bot framework adapter. So the bot framework adapter is going to handle how we're going to get the messages to and from the bot service. So this is going to know how to process everything that came in when a user sent a message to Teams and then Teams sent that on over. That there's going to be an awful lot that's going to come in here. That there's going to be things like the user ID. There's going to be some specific options for the channel that we're going to be using. There's going to be different types of events. So somebody might be typing, and this could actually then come in as a typing event, or it could be that a user joined, and so forth. And so the bot adapter is going to act as our middleware here. It's going to know how to read all of that information that's come in and be able to expose that out. So it's that bot adapter that's going to handle all of the back and forth here. The next thing that you're going to notice is going to be the Echobot. This is going to be our logic. This is our logic. And we'll get into that Echobot and get into that logic here in just a couple of moments, but that's where our logic is going to wind up sitting. Okay. And then if I keep on scrolling down, now what you're going to notice is we're going to create stop it. There we go. Create an instance of that bot framework adapter. These two parameters right here, these are all about being able to communicate with the bot service. So when it comes time to actually take this out to the world, to be able to allow users to be able to communicate with it via Teams or Messenger or whatever, this is going to be the username and password that's going to be required to allow this bot to work inside of the bot service. Needless to say, you want to protect that information. This is going to be our core error handler, which is really just going to print out an error message to the console, so nothing overly fancy there. And we're going to set that onto our adapter. So basically, hey, if something goes wrong, just print out the error message. We're going to create an instance of our bot logic, and then we're going to go ahead and say, all right, let's go ahead and run that logic. So that is the core setup inside of index.ts. And again, what's great here is that this is really just boilerplate code. That the Yeoman generator set this up for me, and there's not going to be a whole lot that I'm going to need to do to update this. So instead, let's move on to our bot logic, shall we? This is sort of where the cooler stuff is, right? Okay. So let's get into it. Now, what we're going to take advantage of here is a little bit of TypeScript magic and a little bit of inheritance. One of the big things about working with a chatbot, and in turn working with things like Messenger and Teams and Slack and so forth, is the fact that there's an awful lot that can happen between the user and our bot. That it's not just simply, hey, the user sent me a message. That there's more to it than that. That it could be that a user has entered the chat. It could be that the user is typing. So if you're, of course, familiar with really almost any messaging app these days, you've no doubt seen the three little dots that somebody is typing, and that is, of course, being sent over to you. Well, because of the fact that our bot is interacting with these chat applications, that little typing can absolutely be sent to our bot and can absolutely be retrieved then and acted upon by our bot. Or obviously, if a user sends a message, if a user maybe ends the dialogue, ends the chat, and so forth. So there's a lot of different things beyond just simply messages that could be sent up to our bot. And that's where we're going to take advantage of this cool little activity handler, because this is going to make it a little easier for us to figure out, okay, well, what could we actually get from the user through the channel, through Messenger, through Teams, through Slack? And so one of them is going to be on message. And that's going to be the user has sent us a message. And don't get me wrong, the core of your logic, 95% of it, is going to be right here. But there's going to be more to it than just that. That one of the other core bits of functionality is going to be an on members added. And this right here is going to be the first main thing that we're going to want to think about when we're thinking about interacting with a user through a chatbot. Let me go ahead and start my bot here. I'm going to say npm run watch. And what this is going to do is it's going to start the web service, and it's also going to keep an eye out for any changes. So anytime that there's a change, it'll just automatically restart the service. I'll need to restart my conversation, but that's okay. But it's automatically going to restart my service. Now, to interact with my bot, I'm going to use the bot framework emulator. And let me go grab that for you here real quick. Bot framework emulator. Boo-ba-da-boo. There you go. So the bot framework emulator is designed to behave like a bot. And what you're going to notice is that it will have some additional bits of functionality that a normal, chat service is not going to have for me being able to do debugging or seeing what's going on behind the scenes. So we were talking for a minute about sending like typing. Well, through this, I could actually go ahead and send typing, or I can send like different system messages as a way of being able to test things. I can also, am I off the air? Let's see. I'm on. Oh, okay, cool. All right. So anyway, yeah. So I can use this to go ahead and test things that I wouldn't be able to very easily through a normal chat application. So I wouldn't be able to do this through, say, like Teams or anything like that. So, so that is what Bot Framework Emulator is all about. It's all about me being able to test my bot. So I'm going to click on Open Bot, and then I'm going to punch in the URL that's been set up here. You're going to notice that that's going to be, in my case, localhost :3978/API/messages. And if I went back to my code, you could actually see inside of Restify, this is what it is that I've configured here. So I'm going to go ahead and click connect. And now this is going to open up my bot window. And so over here on the right-hand side, this is a big part of what it was that I was talking about, that I can see what's going on behind the scenes. I always like to say that there's no magic. And there's no magic in working with bots. And you'll notice if I click on like message here, that this is the JSON that was sent up or sent down, depending on which direction it is that we happen to be going. In this case, it was coming down towards me. This is the JSON that was being sent. So I can see all of this right here. This is what's going back and forth between that web service that we've created here. That's pretty cool. Now, what you're going to notice is inside of our little window over here on the left-hand side is this is the message that we got from the bot. So the message says, hello and welcome. Now, let's imagine, if we will, that we are a user. So I go ahead, I connect to Messenger, I connect to Teams, or however it is that I'm going to be interacting with the bot. I say hi to the bot, or maybe I just join and it's able to proactively send me this message. And all that it says is, hello and welcome. Well, I have a question for you. My question is, what can I say? What can I do? I don't know. And this is exactly it, is that we've provided no guidance whatsoever to the user. That effectively at this point, what we've done here is we've created a command prompt. That with my command prompt, all it's going to say is, in my case, it's the user and directory here, and that's it. And unless you know the language, unless you know the secret handshake, you have no idea what it is that you should be saying at this point. And that's a problem, because now, if I bring this back to my bot here, my user has no idea what to say. They don't know what's available. And so this is going to be key component number one when you're creating a chatbot. That remember that this is going to be the interface right here. That the interface that the user is going to have is simply going to be, for all intents and purposes, nothing but a text box. And so as a result, we want to make sure that the user knows exactly what it is that they are able to do here. So rather than just simply saying, hi there, I'm the blank bot, give the user some direction. Show the user what's available to them. And so let's go back to our code here. Let's make this a little bit better. So on the onMembers added, there's our core welcome text. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to update this to say, hi, I am the festival bot. You can ask me questions like this. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to make this a little bit. There we go. So I'm just going to rearrange so I can type hopefully a little bit faster here. Typing ability is inversely proportional to the number of people that are watching at any given time, as I'm no doubt showing here. Okay. That'll work. Okay. So let's talk about what we've got here. So what I've got, of course, is just a little bit of core text here is, hi, I'm the festival bot. You can ask me questions like, and then I'm showing them examples of the, I can show examples of the bot. Yes, please ridicule my typing. That always helps. And so what you're also going to notice here is the two little whack ends, which of course is for new line. So most channels, and this is something that you always wind up having to check out to make sure that the channel that you're going to be supporting is going to support this. But most channels are going to support some form of Markdown. All right, let's stop here for just a minute and let's talk about this. This is a great conversation point. One of the great advantages, probably the greatest advantage of using something like Bot Framework is the fact that I can write my code once and be able to run it anywhere. So I can write this bot and be able to access it with a text message. I can access it with Messenger. I can access it with Teams. Now, if you think about all of those different services, each one of them is going to have a different set of capabilities. And so, for example, on like a normal text message, it's not going to have that ability. It's not going to know what Markdown is, because text messages don't have the ability to do like bolded messages. Whereas like Messenger and Teams could absolutely handle Markdown. So when you're creating your messages, when you're going to interact with the user, you always need to be thinking about what the experience for the user is going to be and what's going to be available to them. Now, if you remember, we were talking earlier about this little bot framework adapter. And the great thing about the bot framework adapter is that I can get an awful lot of behind the scenes information about what's going on. And one of the things that I can pick out is what the current client is. So if the message came in via text message, then what I could do instead of putting in things like this, putting in Markdown, that instead I could go ahead and just strip all of that out and then just send down my core messages. So that way nobody's going to see like two little asterisks appear on their text messages or whatever it is that, that it might wind up being. Now again, it's going to take a bit more code. So my core point here is really just you want to be thinking about that user experience. You want to be thinking about those channels so that way you can adjust accordingly. Now, in my case, Markdown is going to be supported. So those two little asterisks, that will go ahead and make this as bold, and that's going to make this nice and clear for the user. Now, if we drill down a little bit lower into the rest of the code here, what we're going to see is we've got a little bit of a loop here, which is going to go through all the members that were added. So remember, this is going to be on members added. This is somebody that's now joined the conversation. It's possible in something like Teams that multiple people could have joined in. And so this is now going to loop through all of them and go figure out, okay, well, what ones are new, and go ahead and send a reply back, to them. The send activity is how it is that we're going to send something back. Let's define activity here real quick. An activity is, well, it's an activity. It can be whatever it is that I want to be able to send down to the user and whatever it is that the user has sent up to me. And so I can send down things like messages, which is what I'm doing here. As we're going to see in a few minutes, I could also send down things like buttons. I could send down images. I could send down a typing command, all of those different types of things that I can go ahead and send down. And I do all of that through that send activity. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and send down just text. The reason that we're using this cool little message factory in text is because of the fact that this will actually allow us to set both the text and any speech that we might want to emit. Now, by default, it's always just going to use whatever the core text is as speech. So I technically don't actually need to pass that in twice. The reason that the bootstrapped code did is because it just wants you to get thinking about that, especially if I'm going to be sending down things like buttons or I'm going to be sending down images, where you should always make sure that you're sending down some form of descriptive text as well. Okay, so now let's go ahead and hit save here. And let's come back to our bot, hit restart. And now what you're going to notice is it's, hi, I'm the festival bot. You can ask me questions like this. When is the band playing? Buy tickets. Cool. So now I, as the user, know exactly what it is that I'm able to do here. That I could then go ahead and type, when is the band playing? Buy tickets, and I know that I will have done the right thing. Now let's take this one step further here. And again, I do want to highlight the fact that I am live. Feel free to ask questions as we go here. So let's talk for a little bit about, say, creating a website. That if I create a website, I'm going to take advantage of a lot of different controls that are available to me. That I'm going to take advantage of things like radio buttons and checkboxes. That I'm going to take advantage of things like drop-down lists. And all of those are great because A, I don't have to worry about the user typing in a bad value because they're only going to be able to select from those options. And then B, it's going to be hopefully clearer then for the user as to what it is that I'm expecting of them. That if I ask a question and I give somebody a text box, one of the challenges that I can run into is that maybe my question isn't clear enough. And so now my user doesn't necessarily know what it is that they're supposed to be typing in. And the same thing holds true when we're talking about chatbots. Now with a chatbot, again, the core control here, the core control that we have is that text box down at the very bottom here. That I go in and I say, hi there, it's a text box. That's all that there is to it. And so it can then become a little bit unclear as to what is truly being asked of the user at that point. Now, at the same time, having a text box is one of the greatest powers for a chatbot because it allows the user to describe what it is they might be looking for. So if I'm creating this as a front end for maybe like a search engine behind the scenes, for some form of a ticketing app to go with sort of the most basic of all chatbot examples, which is a help desk bot, the text box there is perfect. But I can always still supply different types of controls, specifically buttons, down to my user. Now it's interesting because whenever I say, hey, use buttons when you're using a chatbot, immediately people go, whoa, wait. Why would I want to use buttons? And the answer is because buttons exist for a reason. Buttons are great because it's going to have some form of descriptive text. It's going to show me my list of options. And when I click on a button, I'm going to know with a very high degree of certainty what's about to happen there, which is never going to be true when you're working with a text box. Bots support buttons. Don't be afraid to use buttons. Buttons are a great user experience. Now, obviously, you don't want to build a bot strictly on buttons. But using buttons to help guide the experience, to help guide the user to whatever it is that they're looking for, is a great experience. And you could also take this one step further. That if we think about that text box again, that one great advantage to having that text box is sort of like the great advantage to having a command line app. That if I have a command line app, I can drill right to exactly what it is that I want. Great example of this is the Azure CLI, the Azure Command Line Interface. That the Azure portal is wonderful because I can see all the options that are available to me. But if I know exactly what it is that I want, it's always going to be much easier for me to dive to that by using the CLI than it is for me to navigate through a portal. And the same thing is going to hold true for buttons. So what I can use my buttons for is also to help train the user. So I could set up maybe a little bit of a wizard here, and then at the end, before I give them the answer, I could train them right there in line and say, hey, next time you could just simply say this. So for example, maybe I have got my wizard of, I show set a button. So what do you want to see? Schedule. And then it will say, okay, well, what day? And it will show me Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I go ahead and I click on Friday. And then the bot could then say, okay, next time you want to see Friday schedule, simply say Friday schedule. And then I go ahead and I show the user the schedule. So now I've got buttons for somebody who's new to the bot, to my app. I've got buttons to help guide somebody who doesn't maybe want to type. And then I've also, in turn, helped that person so that way if they want to be able to type, if they want to be able to cut right to the chase and go right back to whatever piece of information it is they want, I've given them the instructions. There we go. Okay. Give it a second. Okay. Welcome back. Okay. I was making a great point about buttons. All right. In any event. So, TLDR, buttons are a good thing. Buttons can help guide the user. I want to call out a real quick question here from Amelia, who asks, do help desk bots frequently incorporate AI? And I'm actually going to sort of up-level that question into AI all up. And let's answer this question right away. Does your bot need AI? And the answer to that question is no. Your bot does not necessarily need AI. There's this old saying, the only tool that you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. AI is a tool. And AI is a great tool, but it's a tool that has specific uses. So AI can be very helpful for a chatbot in a lot of different scenarios, but not in all scenarios. So for example, something like a help desk bot. I could actually build a very successful help desk bot without a lick of AI. Because if we think about a help desk bot, this is something that could be very heavily button driven. So I could right up at the top go, okay, well, what category is your problem in? Hardware, software. And then if you choose software, I could then go ahead and go through the couple 3 apps that we're going to support. And then show you maybe a list of the 5 most common problems and then go from there. So I could make that very heavily button driven. And then if you get through about like 4 or 5 levels and you go, hey, wait, we don't have an answer for you, we could then go ahead and use some form of handoff and hand off to a human at that point who'd be able to answer your question. So again, no AI needed in that case. Or, again, going back to that help desk bot, if we think about a help desk bot, chances are what we're going to have is some set of data that's going to have a lot of common error messages and a lot of common fixes. So my bot at that point could actually literally become nothing more than a front end to that search box. And in fact, I've seen a lot of great bots that are literally nothing more than that. They're nothing but a facade in front of, say, Azure Search or Elasticsearch behind the scenes. Those types of bots work amazingly well. So you don't need AI to have a successful bot. So remember, again, AI is a tool. So is it common? That really all depends. But I would say specific to like a help desk bot, you would actually probably not need AI, or maybe just a little bit, just to do a little bit of natural language processing, maybe just to extract out like a name of a program or something like that. Okay. Can AI allow for a less strict CLI and then in turn like a less strict messaging? Yvazgi, forgive me if I mispronounced that name, asked that question. So the question is, can AI help make for a less strict CLI? And the answer to that is 100% yes. So version 1 of AI, he said, mostly joking, is a regular expression. So with a regular expression, I can set up patterns and I can look for a lot of different things. And so I can actually get quite far doing nothing but regular expressions without having to fire up any form of NLP, natural language processing, or otherwise. And in fact, I really do recommend that you start by taking a look at, hey, can we just do this with regular expression? Especially if what you're doing is trying to put together some form of a prototype, you're just trying to put together a proof of concept, just do regular expressions. And with a regular expression, I can actually get relatively flexible. But if you do want to allow for a higher level of flexibility, you are going to want some form of natural language processing. You are going to want some form of AI there. That I can build out my bot here, and this is what I'm going to be doing, to be able to answer some basic questions about like when a band is playing or buy tickets or something like that. And I could, with a regular expression here, get pretty far down the path of making this relatively flexible. So for example, on like buy tickets, there's only so many ways that you're going to be able to say this. Or if we think about this for just a minute, think about all the different ways that you could say, I would like to buy tickets. It's always going to be something like, I want to buy tickets. How do I buy tickets? How do I purchase tickets? Purchase tickets, things like that. And so what you're going to notice is that there's going to be some common terms, some common words that are always going to be in there. So I could actually just build up a regular expression and say, that says, hey, if the word like purchase or buy and the word like ticket or entrance or pass appears in a sentence, let's just flag that as, okay, the person is wanting to buy tickets, and then just route the conversation over to the logic that's going to handle that. And I could do all of that without any bit of AI, and then in turn, make it very flexible. And this again kind of goes back to that point that I was making earlier of, hey, do you need AI? And again, the answer is very much it depends. That with just a little bit of string parsing, with a little bit of a regular expression, I can actually get away without always needing to have AI. So don't think that just because you're creating a bot that you need to have AI, and don't think that just because you're allowing the user to type something in that you need to have natural language processing, that there's a lot that you can do with regular expressions and string parsing and things like that. Okay, cool. Gonna get a sip of coffee here. Alrighty. Cool. Where was I? Buttons. That's right. Cool. Okay. So, whoops. I want, that was weird. All right. That's okay. I want code. There we go. All right. So let's go ahead and let's now take a look at buttons here. So buttons are going to be inside of a card. Now, a card is simply generically it's a placeholder for something that's going to be beyond just text. And so there's a lot of different types of cards. You can create your own custom cards and so forth. The most common is going to be what's known as a hero card, and that's going to be the one that I'm going to use right here. So I'm going to say const welcome card equals, and I'm going to use this little thing called card factory to go ahead and create my hero card. This is going to want to know the title, choose an option. It's going to want to know an image if I'm going to use one, which in my case I don't. And then it's going to want to know what buttons do we want. And so the buttons that I'm going to use here are going to be, in my case, buy tickets. And then when does band, or when is band playing? That's what I used there. Okay, cool. So Just like that. And by the way, I could also get a little bit fancier here, which I'm hopefully going to in just a couple of minutes, where what I could do is I could go ahead and just set up an array up top and then have this be dynamically generated so that as I add in more core commands, that I could go ahead and build them in here. So now let's go ahead and await context send activity. And I'm going to want to send in an attachment, and then my welcome card. Cool. All right. So now let me go ahead and save that. Let's go back to our bot. Where's my bot window? Let's hit refresh. And now what you're going to notice is I've got these great little buttons here. And then I go ahead and I hit buy tickets. And now what you're going to notice, and this is actually another very big thing when we're talking about chatbots, is that when I clicked on buy tickets, that it sent that message, buy tickets. To get a little bit technical here, this behavior is what's known as IM back, or instant messaging back, where when I click on a button, it's going to display the text of the button that I clicked on. So you notice that that's what's sent right there. This is a great way to indicate to the user that they've done something here, because there's always going to be some level of latency when you're sending the message up and getting it back. And that's, of course, even before we start to incorporate all of the different services that you might be calling behind the scenes. There's another option, what's known as postback, where when you click on the button, it will still send the message, but it's just not going to display inside the window. Typically, you want to avoid that because of the fact that I don't know then as the user that something is happening. And in fact, one other very big thing, in fact, if you learn nothing else today, learn this. Await, context, send activity, typing. Now my application is going to be too fast here for me to be able to see this in action. But I'll be able to look through the history here and see it. That if you look over here on the right-hand side, look through the history, what you're going to notice is this little thing came down called typing. And what typing will do is it will highlight those three little dots. Always, 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 always use typing, because that's the way that your bot is going to indicate the fact that it's doing something. That, remember, you don't have like the little spinning globe or anything like that that you're going to have inside of a browser. Typing is your way of indicating that the bot is doing something. So it's always a great practice just to go ahead and send typing, especially if whatever it is that you're about to do is going to take a few minutes. If you know that you're going to be stringing together a couple, 3 REST calls, send typing. Okay. Is there a way to select queries in a way that will split data in the most useful way? I don't know that I necessarily understand the question there, Yuvsagi. I apologize. Is this guy finally upgrading Notepad? I don't understand that. Okay, cool. All right, so let's come back over here to our code. And now what you're going to notice is that I've got a great set of buttons here, and now I know exactly, or I've shown my user exactly what is available to them. Now, let's keep on keeping on here. Let's go back to the emulator here, because this is going to give me an opportunity to show something in action. So what you're going to notice is I've given the user buttons, and buttons are great. Buttons are wonderful. I'm a huge fan of buttons. You'll notice that I click buy tickets. It says buy tickets. I can say hello. Of course, again, this is just an Echobot, so it's just going to say hello. I can say Wibble. It's going to go ahead and say Wibble. Now, Buttons are great. But buttons have one major downfall. Notice that my buttons are up here. Notice that I could still click on buy tickets here. And you'll notice that that's still going to send the message. So one very big thing to keep in mind, if you are going to send buttons, is the fact that it's always going to be available to the user, that they could always scroll up. So if you are going to provide buttons, you need to make sure that your code is able to handle that. Now, let's say that I had something set up that was going to be for buy tickets. And now I'm going to ask you what type of credit card it is that you want to use. Well, that's something I don't necessarily want you to scroll back up and reuse. So what I can do in that case is I could do that with a suggested action. And I'm going to do that in just a second here. Okay. As I'm just scrolling up, let me just going to get rid of that. And then now here is, here's going to be my logic. Real quick, is there a way I can change the styles on the chatbot and what the chatbot looks like? Okay, so this is a great question. So the question is from ArcNix, is there a way to change the style on how the chatbot looks? And the answer typically is going to be no. That there is a browser-based client for chatbots known as web chat. And because of the fact that this is browser-based, and because of the fact that it's the client that we, and by we I mean Microsoft, owns, we then give you full capability to control how all of that is going to wind up looking. Unfortunately, if you're going to be using any third-party service, you're always going to be bound by that third-party service. So for example, if I'm using text message to go with kind of the most extreme of stripped down versions of clients rather, my text messages are of course only ever going to be text. Not going to be a whole lot that I can do there. But if you also think about, let's say, Facebook Messenger, that Facebook very strictly controls how their user experience looks, what their color scheme is, what their fonts are, etc. And so as a result, inside of their Messenger client, all of those same rules apply. That the user is going to have some flexibility to maybe do like changing colors and things like that. But as far as you, the bot developer, goes, you're going to have relatively limited control. I want to rephrase that. You're always going to have to play by their rules. That's the way that I want to phrase this. You're always going to have to play by those rules so that you can do certain things with like Markdown of like sending down bold and sending down links, and you can send down images and videos and so forth inside of cards and things like that. But if you really want full control over like colorizing the text, or maybe you're a company and you have specific branding where you have like a specific font and a specific color scheme and things like that you want to be able to use, you're going to have limited ability to be able to incorporate that with a bot. So there's a bit of a trade-off here, that if I'm working with a mobile app, obviously I'm going to have complete control over the mobile app, but the downside is, of course, that the user needs to download that mobile app. Or with a website, I'm going to have complete control over the website, but the downside is the user's going to have to navigate to my website. The great advantage to using something like a chatbot is that I have the ability to meet the user where they're at. So if they navigate to my Facebook page, for example, and I want them to be able to now communicate with my Facebook page, I want them to be able to now, well, talk to me, although they're really actually just talking to a bot at that point. then I can do that with a bot. But now I'm going to be bound by the rules of Messenger. So there is always going to be a little bit of a trade-off there. So the amount of control that you're going to have over the style is going to be limited based on that. Oh, okay. So the question from Yuvsagi is, let's say you're selling a car, you want to ask what the price is, car type, etc. So basically, what you want to be able to do is to ask follow-up questions. Let's talk this through. So let's say for example, that I was going to be doing something that's going to be fancier than what I'm going to do with my buy tickets example. So if we think about something like buying festival tickets, what we're going to want to know, the questions that we'd want to be able to ask would be things like maybe what day, or maybe the full festival. I'd want to be able to ask maybe things like the level, so that maybe there's like a VIP level, or there's a drink package, or something like that that might be available. And so we want to be able to ask that. Maybe we also want to be able to ask about whether or not you want to pre-buy any swag. So maybe for an extra $10, we'll give you a t-shirt or whatever else it is that it might be. So those are all the pieces of information that I want to be able to collect. Now, the catch that we have here is that our user could say a lot of different things. That they could say, I want to buy tickets for Saturday, or I want a VIP pass, or something like that. So I want to be able to allow the user to maybe type something like that. And if we look at this, now I've got part of the information, but I don't have all of the information. So the question then becomes, okay, well, now what's going to be the best way to start to parse out those pieces of information and then go back and ask for the rest of it? So the answer to the first part, how best to parse that out, this is probably going to be a space where using something like Lewis is really going to shine. Where what I can do is I can train up Lewis, or Lewis is our natural language processing software. I could train up my NLP to be able to pick out those individual parts. It will pass it to me. And then effectively what I'm going to do behind the scenes is I'm going to start to just build out an object where I'm going to go, oh, okay, so I want the length. So whatever it is that happens to be, I want the level, and whatever that happens to be. So let's say VIP, and then I want whether or not you want swag. So what will happen is my NLP, my natural language processing, will be able to pick out something like, oh, okay, they said a day of the week. Cool. So now I know that that's going to wind up inside of my length. Or my NLP will be able to pick out, oh, okay, they said the level, and then I'll be able to grab that. And so now it's just code to then walk through the rest. And obviously you could get a little bit fancier here with like a for each loop, but I mean, it literally could just simply be a series of if statements where I say if whatever our current, let's just call it package. Let's say package.length. If we don't have a value there, then I could go ahead and say prompt for length, however that might look. And then if not package.level, then I could go ahead and say prompt for level. And then if not package.swag, then I could go ahead and say prompt for swag, or however it is that might look. Again, I'm just sort of writing pseudocode here just to hopefully give you a little bit of an example. But this is basically how it would look, that this would be a great use case for NLP, for natural language processing, because NLP is going to be able to pick out those individual pieces a little bit better than a regex is going to be able to pick that out. Okay. Arknix asks the question, you can combine Chatbot with Lewis, have available knowledge base, frequently asked questions, so couldn't I code it every now and then? I'm not sure that I understand the question, but my answer to that is, can you combine multiple services? So can I use, say, like Q&A Maker? Can I use Lewis? Can I use a search service? Can I use my own custom code and string all of that together into a single bot? And the answer to that question is 100% yes. Again, all of these are tools. AI is a tool. Q&A Maker is a tool. Search is a tool. All of them are tools that you can then, in turn, take advantage of. Okay. Cool. Great questions. All right. Let's see. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to make things a little bit better from a developer standpoint. That right now I've got those hard-coded action string literals down below. So I'm now going to create some objects that are going to better help me out here. So let's go do this. Let's go ahead and say const action prompts equals actions. Map. Okay, and you know what I'm going to do for right now? I'm just going to go ahead and, because of the fact that I'm using buttons, I'm not going to worry about showing the user what it is they can type. I'm just going to give them the buttons. And so my buttons then are just going to be the action prompts. Just going to make my code a little bit better to read. Okay, there we go. Okay, cool. Let me make sure that my bot is working here. Oh, it is. Okay, good. All right. Now then, let's come up here. Okay, so what I did is I created an array up here that I'm just calling actions. I'm giving each one a name, and then I'm giving each one a prompt, and it's that prompt that's going to display out. Now, the great part about having this prompt then is that now I can go in and specifically look for that prompt. So now what I'm going to say is const action. So this is inside of onMessage. And when they click on a button, because of the fact that we're doing this as I am back, it's literally just as if they typed in the message. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say action equals actions find, and then and I'm going to say a dot prompt dot locale compare don't worry, I'm going to talk about what it is that I'm doing here in just a second. I just want to type and then I'm going to talk. Message, en, and then sensitivity base. Okay. Different kind of base. And then, cool. All right. So let's talk about what's going on. So first of all, this line right here. So what I'm doing is I am pulling out the text that the user sent and just storing this into a constant that I'm calling message, just to make my life a little bit easier. So the way that I get whatever it is that the user has sent up is off of context.activity. And for the text of whatever it is that they sent, I just simply say .text. So that will tell me what the user typed. Or if they clicked on a button that's using I am back, whatever it was that was typed via the button. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, because of the fact that all of those were now listed here as prompts, I can now get a little bit fancy, and now I can go ahead and say, oh, all right, well, let's go ahead and give each one of these a name. And I can even actually, which I'll do in a minute, go back and add on a function that I could just go ahead and pass control over to. So now I can say if action, and then we'll go ahead and do something here in a minute, or, and then a friendly error message. Await context, send activity. Sorry, I do not understand. Cool, just like that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make my life a little bit easier here, and I'm going to add on my function right here. So this is now what's going to happen when we want to go buy tickets. So that way I can actually just say, await action, action, and then pass in my context. So pretty slick. We'll just go ahead and run the logic. So now let's come back up to here, and on our turn context, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say await context send activity. I'm going to say message factory, and let's go ahead and say attachment, and let's say message factory, card factory, hero card, and cool. Okay, so here's what's about to happen is when somebody says, in my case, buy tickets, we're then going to run this code right here. And what this code is going to do is it's going to set up a set of buttons that's going to ask what credit card type you want to use, and then MasterCard, Visa. So that's what it's going to do. Now, here's my problem. When I go into my emulator and I hit restart, choose my option, buy tickets. Oh, cool. And I get an error message. What is my error message? Action.action is not a function. The heck it's not. Uh-oh. What did I do? What did I not do? See, we're really cooking here on this show. Oh, I know why. Hold, please. There we go. Okay. You know what? Give me 2 seconds. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. The Industrial Revolution was neither industrial nor a revolution. Discuss. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So what I'm doing here is the proper way to do a string insensitive comparison in JavaScript is to use this little locale compare as opposed to just always converting to uppercase and lowercase letters. So the catch is, though, that rather than just giving you back a Boolean, which I always forget, it gives you back a number for sorting. And so if we get 0, that tells us that it's the same. So to make my life now a little bit easier, I'm now just going to say compare a dot prompt to the message. There we go. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Now if I come back over here to my bot, hit refresh. There we go. Now I go ahead and I click buy tickets. So now what you're going to notice is a bad example of buttons, because now what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to click on those individual items at all times. So I would always be able to go back to that and click on it. So that's actually problem number 1 here. Problem number 2 is this. What do you think would be the next question that I'm going to ask after you click on MasterCard or Visa here? What do you think my next question is going to be? It always takes about 30 seconds to come through to the other side. The next question that I'm probably going to ask the user after they choose the credit card type is the credit card number. Raise your hand if you think it's a good idea to ask somebody in a messaging app for their credit card number. If you raise your hand, please put your hand down. It is never, 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 never a good idea to ask for sensitive information inside of a chatbot that's hosted inside of a messaging platform that's going to maintain any level of history. Now, if you're using something like web chat, which is never going to maintain history, you've maybe got a little bit of flexibility there, but even then, I would still be very, very, very nervous about doing something like that. If you're doing it inside of something like Messenger, or inside of something like Teams or Slack, that's now always going to sit there in their history. So all somebody would ever have to do is just scroll up in their history and, oh, look, there's a credit card number. That's an absolutely terrible idea. And I would go one step further here, which is to say that if you're asking a user through a messaging app, which effectively is what a bot is, for anything sensitive, then you're also then training the user that this is an appropriate medium with which to send sensitive data. And it's not. especially because of the fact that there isn't necessarily going to be a way that I'm going to be able to always guarantee that I'm talking to the right endpoint. Yes, on Facebook, there's things like the little checkbox and so forth, but even then, it can become a little bit sketchy. Whereas if I'm in a browser, now I've got HTTPS. And so if instead of using something like MasterCard Visa, maybe instead I go ahead and I say, Amazon or PayPal, that this is now how I'm going to allow you to pay. And then the expectation would then be that when you click on the item, that I would then take you to the Amazon website, or I would then take you to the PayPal website. That's a better way to do that. Because now the user is going to see the Amazon website. Now they're going to see the PayPal website. And they're going to trust those websites to gather that type of information. So never, 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 never ask for sensitive information. Well, let's go ahead and solve the other core problem here that we have, which is the fact that those buttons are going to now sit there forever. So instead what we can do is this. Is what I'm going to, PCI compliance is serious business, as the Frosty Crab points out. Absolutely, 100%. Don't ask for sensitive information. Okay. Await context, send activity, how do you want to pay? And now, what I'm going to use instead is this little thing called suggested actions. Oops. There we go. All right. So now watch the core difference here. And for right now, I'm just going to go back over here to my code, and I'm just going to echo back out the message. Just so we can see it being sent out, or it's being sent back. Echo, bloop, bloop, and then my message. Okay, cool. All right. The sound effects help, by the way. All right, let's come back over here. Hit restart, yada, yada, yada. I'm the festival bot. Choose an option. I'm going to hit buy tickets. How do I want to pay? Now, what I want you to notice, first of all, is the fact that those buttons are now down here at the very bottom. And if you're using something like Facebook Messenger or anything like that, then what you would notice is that those are the little auto prompts that you wind up getting down at the very bottom. And you've no doubt seen them by now when you're just chatting with a human friend of yours. That a lot of them are now including some form of AI of, hey, do you probably want to send this message? You probably want to send this message. You probably want to send this message. Of course, it's very rare that any of them are actually right. Conversation for a different time. But when you hit one of those buttons, you would notice that they would then go away. That's exactly what's going to happen with suggested actions. That if I click on, for example, PayPal, now what I want you to notice is that PayPal has gone away. Here's the foolproof mechanism for preventing somebody from clicking on a button. Take the button away from them. Foolproof. Guaranteed to work. So now if I come back up here, again, I can still click buy tickets. I click buy tickets. Again, it sent that up. How do I want to pay? I say Amazon, and again, that's now gone. User's not able to then click on that button. Cool. All right. So, TLDR on all of that. Buttons are a good thing. Keep in mind that if you send a button, normal button, that will always be available. So you always want to make sure that your code is able to handle that. In addition, suggested actions are just like buttons, but they're single fire, one-time use. So that you click on that, and then it will go away. And again, the best way to keep somebody from clicking on a button is to take that button away from them. All right. Now, let's talk about another core component in bots. And this is getting help. If we think about a mobile web app or even just a normal mobile app, there are certain components that we've just come to expect and accept. For example, those three little lines up in the upper left or the upper right-hand corner, sometimes known as the hamburger, those are always going to be there. We've come to expect those. And so if I'm not exactly sure what's available to me, I can click on the hamburger. Or if I'm using a desktop app and I'm going, hey, I want help. F1, global help key. And that's going to be implemented basically everywhere. Or heck, you can see it right here in my copy of Visual Studio Code. If I go to my Visual Studio Code, that I've got a help dialog. And so I can hit that and find out more about what's available to me. Well, let's go back to my chatbot. And what you're going to notice on my chatbot is that that's not there. There's no hamburger. Sadly, getting kind of hungry here. Most of these jokes are just for my own entertainment. And there's also no help menu option. However, let's again think about what the user is going to intuitively expect. That if I'm communicating with something, if I'm quote unquote talking to something, what would I expect to be able to send up pretty much at all times? And there's really two main commands that I would expect to be able to send up at all times. And the first is going to be a help command. I want to be able to send help. So let's go ahead and do this. If compare message help otherwise, and then the rest of our logic down below here. And so now I can go ahead and send out whatever help message it is that I want. So I could go ahead and await context, send activity, message factory, text, I'm a festival bot. And then wait, okay. Oops. Oh, sorry. I was on the wrong screen. I apologize. I was on the wrong screen. Here we go. There's my code. There we go. Sorry about that. I thought I had hit the button. Apparently I didn't. Yeah, there we go. So here's my code. So here's what I did is, here, we can, here, we'll just rewind all of it. Okay, so that core part there's my logic. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put in an if statement up above to look for help. And then down below is going to be my logic. And then on our help, we'll go ahead and send out our kind of normal default greeting here. Just like that. And so now, come back over here. Oops, come back over here. There we go. And then hit restart. And now what you're going to notice is it says, hi, I'm the festival bot. And then we can go ahead and offer up our buy tickets, what time is banned. And then if I go in and I say help, then it will go ahead and give me that help command. So we always want to make sure that we're sending down help. Another big command that you want to ensure that you incorporate is the cancel command. That one thing that we didn't get into yet, or that we're not going to have an opportunity to get into today, unfortunately, is what's known as a multi-turn dialogue, where what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to walk the user through a set of prompts. So I need one piece of information, and then another piece of information, and then another piece of information, and then another piece of information. There's two problems that we wind up getting into here. Number one is that the user can wind up getting lost somewhere in the middle there, where they're not sure of exactly what it is they should be doing, or maybe they just want to exit out. So when it comes to help, you want to make sure that you're going to be providing context-aware help messages, so that you could go ahead and tell them, hey, here are the available options based on where they happen to be in that walkthrough. You also want to make sure that they always have the ability to cancel the operation. So that way, if the user maybe started down a path and then they realize, oh wait, no, I don't actually want to buy tickets, that we can give them the opportunity to cancel out of that. So always support help and always support cancel. The last big thing that I want to highlight here is this concept of a timeout. One of the challenges that we have with a bot is the fact that you can send a message down to the user and not get an immediate reply. I had a coworker a long time ago who loved to say that instant messaging does not mean instant reply, which, by the way, has really changed my outlook on instant messaging clients. That it's taken away my urge, it's taken away the pressure. That's the word that I'm looking for. It's taken away the pressure that I sometimes feel to reply to like Teams messages immediately. Instant messaging does not mean instant replies. And the same holds true when we're talking about chatbots. Just because you sent a message down does not mean that you're going to get a message back immediately. And when we're working with, say, like a web application, there's a built-in timeout mechanism. Either that the user doesn't do anything for, by default, 20 minutes, and their current session expires, or that the user closes the tab, and now all of that goes away. But when we're talking about chatbots, there's no built-in mechanism for timeouts. And there's also no built-in mechanism for just closing out a window. That if I have a bot, say, inside of Slack or inside of Teams, just because I close Teams and then reopen it does not automatically restart everything that I've been doing with the bot. So one thing that you'll always want to do is to note somewhere on the user profile when the last message was that you got from the user. And then if it's been past a certain period of time, say 20 minutes, ask the user, hey, this is where we left off. Did you want to pick up from here? Because there's a very good chance that not only A, do they not want to pick up from there, that B, they probably forgot what it was they were doing in the first place anyway. So to sum all of this up, when you're working with chatbots, there's a lot that you really have to think about with regards to the user experience that is different than creating a web app, than creating a mobile app. And that's, of course, not to say in any way, shape, or form that you don't have to think about the user experience when you're building a mobile app or when you're building a web app, because you obviously do. But the paradigm is different. The idioms are different. The controls are different. The expectations are different. And in a lot of ways, when we're talking about chatbots, especially because of the fact that these are emerging technologies, we have to realize that our users are not always going to be familiar with what's available to them. So as a result, we want to make sure that we provide help at all times, both when they say help, but also proactively offer guidance. And this can be done through buttons. Don't be afraid of buttons, or through suggested actions. We want to make sure that they have the opportunity to cancel and get out of whatever it is that they happen to be doing. We also want to think about the eventual client here, because unlike with a web app or a mobile app, I'm not going to have complete control over that interface. So I want to make sure that I'm thinking about all of that in advance. TLDR is think about how it is that the user is going to be interacting with your application, and make sure that you meet them where they're at. Because meeting them where they're at is what chatbots is really all about. Okay. With that, I unfortunately need to get out of here. There's going to be another stream that's going to be starting up in just a couple of minutes. I do want to highlight the fact that on our YouTube Microsoft Reactor page, I don't know if Megan's still there, but if you want to throw that into the chat window, that would be greatly appreciated. The Microsoft Reactor page, there's actually a set of 4 videos that are up there. There's going to be a great interview that we had with PM. There's going to be me going over bots. There's going to be Jasmine Greenway going over Lewis, and then obviously this one. So go in, check all of those out. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and come find me on Twitter, and I will talk to all of you later. Thank you again, and so long. Bye.